Good morning. This hearing of the House Environmental Resource and Energy Committee will now come to order. Mary, can you lead us in the pledge?
Of course. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Do you want this down a little?
So, why can't I hear anybody?
Okay. Evan, can you take the roll? Okay, so hold on. Before you do that, tell me, these are the leaves.
Yes.
And these
Yeah,
are what?
these are just people. The checks are, here, and then V is virtual.
Got it. Okay, go ahead.
Vitale,
Here,
Fleming,
leave,
Green, Hohenstein.
Here.
Oh, she said here. Hohenstein.
Here.
Isaacson.
Here.
Kazim.
leave,
Mays.
leave,
Otten. Pielli.
Here online.
Salisbury.
Here online.
Siegel.
leave,
Steele.
Here.
Takak. Webster.
Here online.
Causer.
Here.
Armanini.
Here.
Barton.
On leave.
Borowitz.
On leave.
Cook.
On leave.
Ham.
On leave.
Kephart.
Here.
Schemmel.
Here.
Stambaugh.
here,
Warner.
On leave.
Wentling.
On leave.
Okay. Today's public hearing is on House Bill 2277 by Rep. Friel Otten, the so-called press legislation. Last Monday was the hottest day globally ever recorded, beating the record actually set the day before. Scientists tell us that possibly Monday was the warmest day in 120,000 years. Right now, about 102 large wildfires are burning nationally in this country. Hurricane Beryl became a Category 5 hurricane doing substantial damage to the Caribbean on July 1st, the earliest ever on record. Climate change is here. It's not something theoretical. It's not something in the future. It is here. And scientists tell us we must reach carbon neutrality by mid-century to avoid its worst effects. That necessarily involves expanding renewables and other carbon-free sources of energy like nuclear. In 2002, this legislature passed the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard Act, requiring electric distribution companies like PECO to get 8% of the power they use to distribute to customers from renewable sources by 2021. Since that time, Pennsylvania has been greatly outstripped by other states. Rep. Friel, in conjunction with the Shapiro administration, has introduced House Bill 2277, which in very broad terms requires 35% renewables by 2035. In other words, requiring electric distribution companies like PECO and PP&L and so forth to get 35% of their power they distribute to customers from renewable or Tier 1 sources. This is the second hearing we are having on this very important topic. Today we have 7 presenters. Lee Meredith from the Solar Energy Industries Association, Evan Vaughn from the Mid-Atlantic Renewable Energy Coalition, John Kotek from the Nuclear Energy Institute, Julia Courtray from Evergreen, Nick Bibby from Advanced Energy United, Rod Williamson from the Industrial Energy Consumers of Pennsylvania, and Davy Ramkissoon from the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia. The format, as normal, will be each speaker will be allotted in their segment a total of 15 minutes, the first 8 of which, up to the first 8 of which will be for them to give a presentation, and the balance will be for member questioning. If we do not get to all members' questions in a given segment, then that member will have preference to ask a question in the next segment. Before we begin, Chairman Cowser, do you have any thoughts or comments for the committee?
Mr. Chairman, my last name is pronounced Causer. It's not Cow, and I appreciate the opportunity. As I've said before, my biggest concern is the impact of environmental extremism and going too far. My concerns are the impacts of mandates and grid stability. So those are big concerns for me, and I look forward to the information presented today. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I should just call you Marty and leave it at that, or Mr. Chairman. In any event, let's have our first panel, which will be 2 speakers, Lee Meredith from Solar Energy Industries Association and Evan Vaughn from the Mid-Atlantic Renewable Energy Coalition. Again, this will be a 30-minute panel. Each of you will speak up to 8 minutes, and then we will open the balance for questions. So Lee and Evan, either of you can go first, and please begin when ready.
I can go first. Good morning, Chairman. Thanks, Evan. Good morning, Chairman Vitale, Chairman Causer, and members of the House Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on House Bill 2277, also known as the Pennsylvania Reliable Energy Sustainability Standards, or PRESS Act. My name is Leah Meredith, and I am the Mid-Atlantic Senior Manager with the Solar Energy Industries Association, or SEIA. Founded in 1974, SEIA is the National Trade Association for the solar and storage industries, building a comprehensive vision for the advancement of these technologies by supporting policy measures that will drive needed investment in clean, domestic, local job-producing solar generation. We work with our 1,200 member companies, which include solar manufacturers, service providers, residential, community, and utility scale solar developers, installers, construction firms, and investment firms, as well as our strategic partners, to shape fair market rules that promote competition and the growth of reliable, low-cost solar power. SEIA has 36 member companies located in Pennsylvania, with many more national firms also conducting business in the state. Governor Shapiro's PRESS Act is a bold proposal to diversify Pennsylvania's electricity generation mix. Broadly, this legislation would increase Pennsylvania's Tier 1 alternative energy goal, which includes solar, photovoltaic, and solar thermal energy resources, wind power, geothermal, small modular reactors, fusion energy, and fugitive emissions, from 8% to 35% by 2035. Requires 10% of Pennsylvania's Tier 1 alternative energy sources to be generated in-state by 2030, and retires the existing solar and other resource-specific carve-outs from Pennsylvania's energy procurement targets. Utility-scale solar and onshore wind are now the cheapest sources of new electricity generation in the United States. The cost to install solar has dropped by more than 40% over the last decade, leading the industry to expand into new markets and deploy thousands of systems nationwide, beating out the cost of coal and fossil fuel gas-fired generation. Key factors regarding the continued cost decline of solar generation are technological advancement and the industry continuing to lower its operating expenses and capital costs. While some have suggested that the growth of clean energy is responsible for rising electricity rates, the evidence does not support that assertion. Rather, electricity price increases reflect economy-wide inflation. As prices have risen across the economy, so have the rates consumers pay for electricity. Between 2015 and 2021, residential electricity rates generally grew more slowly than inflation, and it wasn't until 2022 and 2023 that this gap has begun to close. Between 2021 and 2023, Pennsylvania was one of only 15 states to see residential electricity rates increase faster than inflation, despite seeing a paltry 3% growth of wind and solar share of the electricity generation mix in the state. Many of the states that saw the largest increase in wind and solar over the same time period saw electricity rates increase below the rate of inflation. For example, the share of electricity generated from wind in Iowa increased from 15% in 2010 to nearly 60% of the state's electricity generation in 2023, while the state's electricity rates grew at a rate slower than that of both inflation and 42 other states. SEIA thus fully supports increasing Pennsylvania's statewide alternative energy targets and commends Governor Shapiro, Representative Otten, and the dozen of co-sponsors of the PRESS Act for their leadership on this important legislation. I will say, however, that SEIA and other members of the renewable energy industry were not significantly consulted by the Shapiro administration in contributing to the construction of the PRESS Act. So as a representative of the businesses who will be the ones making the decision of whether to invest and develop projects in Pennsylvania, SEIA would like to see a handful of changes in legislation in order for Pennsylvania to cost effectively maximize the benefits of solar energy generation. Pennsylvania's Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, first enacted 20 years ago, has an in-state solar requirement of 0.5%. The PRESS Act retires the existing solar and other resource-specific carve-outs from Pennsylvania's alternative energy procurement targets, thus allowing for solar and any other Tier 1 resource built across the PJM territory, which includes 13 states in the District of Columbia, to compete against each other and be eligible to sell their RECs into the Pennsylvania marketplace. We believe that SEIA supports this environment of market flexibility within the PJM states and believes it can be balanced with policy support for renewable energy projects developed within Pennsylvania. Specifically, SEIA asked for reconsideration of the requirement within the PRESS Act that an individual generating unit with a nameplate capacity of over 150 megawatts must be located in state to be eligible for reliable energy credits. Pennsylvania's grid benefits from large grid-scale solar projects importing their electrons from neighboring states, which is indeed one of the primary reasons we have a regional transition and REC marketplace through PJM. As currently drafted, it is unclear if the PRESS Act's new restriction on the eligibility of regional projects being able to participate in the Pennsylvania REC market would grandfather existing contracts or allow for projects to split their capacity and allocate a portion under 150 megawatts to sell to Pennsylvania customers. So we see clarity on that. Since the key attribute for maintaining grid reliability is where the energy is delivered into the grid, we also ask for a technical fix to the geographic eligibility section of the PRESS Act to include energy sources that are themselves not located within PJM, but still deliver power into the PJM territory via transmission. Finally, SEIA recommends that the PRESS Act be amended to include specific goals for distributed generation resources, similar to the carve-out for solar customer generators and Pennsylvania's current AEPS policy. Distributed solar is the workforce engine of the solar industry. More than 80% of the solar workforce in the installation sector work in installing distributed solar systems. Including targets for customer generators will not only have a positive economic impact, but will help create a more efficient and resilient electric grid. distributed generation solar, such as those placed on the rooftops of homes and businesses, allow the customers to generate their own electricity and supply the grid with the excess energy the system generates beyond what is needed by the customer. This
Leah, you have
excess
about
electricity-
30 seconds.
Thank you. This excess electricity is sent to the power grid and distributed locally, decreasing line loss and increasing utility efficiency. When these customers remove a portion of the power needs from the grid, it also reduces strain on the local utility. The introduction of the PRESS Act comes at a critical juncture in the need for modernization of Pennsylvania's electric grid and generation portfolio. The needs of Pennsylvania's electric grid and the capabilities of the solar industry have evolved greatly since the existing APS legislation was first enacted 20 years ago. The state's outdated energy policies and regulations have created an unfriendly business environment for the solar industry, with some companies pulling out of the Pennsylvania market and earlier in full. Earlier this year, one of SEIA's members was forced to close one of their warehouses in Pennsylvania and lay off a portion of their Pennsylvania staff. They say that politics and policymaking is where the art meets the science of compromise, and it's my fervent hope that we can chart a bipartisan path forward with House Bill 2277, which SEIA recognizes will likely necessitate addressing some of the concerns raised by the committee on the June 24th hearing. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you. And I forgot, but I wanted to ask Danielle if she had any opening remarks. So if you do, let's do this just for timing purposes. Let's hold off until this panel, and then you can. Oh, you just closing. That works. Okay, Evan, why don't you go next?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Republican Chair Causer, it's great to be here with you today. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Members of the committee, to those who don't know me, my name is Evan Vaughn. I'm Executive Director of the Mid-Atlantic Renewable Energy Coalition, or MERIC Action for short. We are a nonprofit organization that represents utility-scale solar, wind, and battery storage developers, wind turbine and solar panel manufacturers, and public interest organizations that are dedicated to promoting the growth and development of clean energy here in Pennsylvania and in 9 other states across the PJM grid. On behalf of MERIC and our member companies, I'm testifying today in strong support of House Bill 2277. This legislation, as you know, would codify Governor Shapiro's PRESS clean energy standards, and through its passage, we strongly believe that Pennsylvania can secure new investment in clean and reliable energy sources that are needed to power the state, the Commonwealth, and the grid throughout the 21st century. I'll try to abbreviate some portions of my comments where I believe that Leah spoke really well on behalf of especially some of the regional issues, but I'm going to jump right in and try to get through the key points. This legislation is very timely, and I'm encouraged that there's already been 2 committee hearings on this legislation. As I think this committee knows, the onshoring of manufacturing, data center growth, accelerating electrification of transportation and industry are driving electricity demand really for the first time in recent memory. We're no longer in the era of flat electricity demand growth. Total electricity use throughout the PJM grid is expected to increase nearly 40% by 2039. This is really substantial, and it's going to require new investment in energy sources, especially clean energy sources. So meeting this demand at scale is going to require more than Pennsylvania currently has today in the generation fleet. Large-scale solar and wind energy projects, as Leah said, remain the least expensive forms of new energy generation. Even so, as our members have told me, the structure of clean energy investments and the combined economic headwinds resulting from inflation and rising interest rates do make the incentives proposed in this legislation critical for new deployment. It's hard to build new things, it's expensive, and it's risky. And those are factors that apply to any energy source, not just clean energy. As I mentioned, inflation rates, we're all feeling those go up. We're also seeing rising interest rates mean that project developers and investors have to guarantee a higher rate of return. So that is rising cost, even as the macro trend, as Leah said, is to bring down costs for wind and solar. The majority of costs associated with new solar, wind, and energy storage facilities comes upfront. It's capital investment during construction. The electricity afterwards comes in at almost zero marginal cost, just minor maintenance and operation fees factoring in. So these are really smart upfront investments that could be made today and in the near term in order to pay off for the Commonwealth down the road. Incentives from House Bill 2277 combined with reasonable statewide regulations on clean energy projects to make sure that we build them right. And I'm specifically thinking of Senate Bill 211, Senator Yaw's solar decommissioning bill. These are the kinds of things that will reduce the risk for capital investments and make Pennsylvania a more attractive market to build new power plants, which again, we're going to need to meet demand. The result, adding more wind and solar along with storage is going to result in a healthier and more diverse electricity mix for Pennsylvania ratepayers. The passage of this bill will empower Pennsylvania with a plan that is necessary because if we don't make these prudent investments, we're not going to be able to meet demand, as I said. From a regional standpoint, House Bill 2277 arguably represents the single biggest new market opportunity for energy investment under consideration by any state legislature in the region. So I commend you all for considering this legislation from that perspective. As the current AEPS alternative energy portfolio standard has been achieved and subsequently flatlined, we've seen slower investments in the state. So without an implementation of a forward-looking plan like House Bill 2277, we're going to continue to see sluggish investment that doesn't keep pace with demand. Earlier this year, Merrick Action, Advanced Energy United, and the American Clean Power Association commissioned a study from the respected analysis firm Gable Associates, who are experts on the PJM market. They looked at the economic benefits of Pennsylvania attaining 30% renewable energy by 2030. Our report found that such a policy would result in more than $13.1 billion invested in Pennsylvania over the next 7 years and could sustain up to 129,000 additional job years, so 1 year for one job, between 2024 and 2031. House Bill 2277, of course, is a different piece of legislation, doesn't align exactly with House Bill 1467, which was that 30% by 2030 that we based our study on, but we think that there are reasonably similar and impressive benefits, if not bigger benefits, that would come from House Bill 2277. One particularly beneficial aspect of 2277, which is different from that previous legislation, is the focus on energy storage, including long duration storage. As I said, PJM is expecting significant demand growth and significant retirements of existing power plants. So we're going to need reliable energy as well as clean and affordable energy. PJM's existing resource mix, as you all know, is heavily reliant on thermal energy, including natural gas, nuclear, and coal. House Bill 2277 provides the Commonwealth with an opportunity to diversify, including with new dispatchable energy storage projects paired with wind and solar. We are strongly supportive of that incentive in Tier 2 to combine press energy resources with storage to qualify for an additional incentive. As you know, this bill is not proposing to eliminate traditional energy sources like coal, gas, and nuclear, but it is going to help us grow new, dispatchable, reliable energy sources, including wind and solar paired with storage. And in doing so, that will make Pennsylvania's overall electricity supply less vulnerable to gas and coal fuel shortages and unexpected power plant shutdowns during peak demand periods. Every power plant, even nuclear power plants, require backup in case they have to go offline. And so we don't see a substantial increase in the need for backup generation, especially if we incorporate these storage facilities with wind and solar. And again, this legislation is contemplating 35% clean, nowhere close to 100%. As introduced, we do hope to see a few changes, and I'll try to summarize my comments here as Leah touched on a few of those points. We would like to see the legislature consider standalone storage incentives. Right now, you have to have a pairing with wind or solar in order to qualify, or perhaps nuclear. It would be great to allow standalone storage. That could be done through different legislation, perhaps.
Evan, you have about a minute.
Great, I'll wrap it up.
267, 226.
We are also concerned about the border closure element of this legislation. We represent regional developers, as Leah said, allowing for any size project regionally to participate in the clean energy market is going to be really critical to ensure low costs for consumers. We respect that this policy is designed to drive job creation and investment in the state. And we think that as our analysis of previous legislation has shown, that a policy that allows for some out-of-state component does deliver the best overall results. We're not saying don't require in-state generation. We want these policies to invest in Pennsylvania, but have a balance. That's the best way to move forward. And we do support, I'll say in closing, the idea of having some kind of support for small solar. We don't represent distributed rooftop solar, but we think that a diverse mix of different sizes of solar makes for the best policy. And so we'll follow the lead of SEIA and other organizations on that front. So thank you for the time. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to addressing any questions that you might have. And thank you, Leah, for also touching on some of these important issues.
Okay, thank you to you both. And I might just start out by saying, this is a bill that, assuming the prime sponsor is agreeable, something we may run when we get back to session pretty soon. So I would ask you to perhaps summarize your amendment ideas in writing and forward them to the committee and the prime sponsor. And these are things we, as a committee, can consider as we consider this bill when we get back in late September. Okay, Marty, do you have any questions to start out with?
Chairman, I do have a question. My major concern is grid stability, reliability, and overall the rising cost of energy. And a massive artificial subsidy in renewable sources, I believe, will have a dramatic impact on energy costs, and want to get your opinion on that, because that would be very concerning for consumers.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to jump in, and Leah, feel free to add here. I take your concerns really seriously, and I think that, as I said, the key aspect of this is we are looking at having to make new investments to meet demand. I think, were we in a scenario where electricity demand was flat, there may be lower cost solutions to, making some smaller investments or smaller incremental growth, but truly, we're going to need a lot of new energy on the grid, and consumers are going to have to pay one way or the other. And as I mentioned, this policy creates a plan for the state, intentionality to those investments. What I would hate to see is rising electricity demand and increasing urgency to keep the lights on, resulting in kind of unplanned investments and potentially expensive legacy power plants, where you're basically putting a Band-Aid investment on a legacy power source as opposed to investing in the future and investing in new facilities, including nuclear, including thermal, that this policy includes. So I think that when you look at building new power plants, again, wind and solar are the cheapest options out there, and this incentive helps overcome that hurdle of making a new investment, which is inherently riskier than making an investment on, for example, an existing facility.
It is concerning that, and the question comes around often, why do we need the subsidy? Because there seem to be a lot of proposals out there for solar projects, and the question comes back around constantly, why do we need a subsidy like this when there are significant federal subsidies and projects that PJM has said are in the queue already?
Yeah, I'll take that one too. One thing that you're right, PJM has noted there's a robust, frankly, something like 90% of the queue is solar and storage. One key thing to remember is that those projects are pre-commercial. So just because they're in the queue doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be built. In fact, PJM has come into legislatures across the region and has said that there's over 40 gigawatts of projects that are out of the queue, but that haven't gotten built. And so there's a number of reasons for that. PJM will point you to local zoning and permitting challenges, but also supply chain inflation, et cetera. And so really the way to address this issue is to have a stable, forward-looking policy that folks can depend on when they're making these investments to turn those queue position projects into real steel in the ground, into real jobs. But also, I want to come back to, Chairman Yaw on the Senate side. His decommissioning legislation is another important piece of this. Having reasonable statewide standards prevents the sort of mismatch of localities making decisions around large energy projects, not necessarily seeing the full picture of what's out there on the PJM grid. So I think that there's good kind of common sense solutions across the board here, and appreciate your question because it's really a significant issue for the grid today.
Okay, thank
I have
you.
other questions.
and I-
No,
Wait,
hold
thank
on,
you.
let's,
Thank you, Chairman Vitale.
Okay, go ahead.
Leah, did you?
I was going to add, if that's all right.
You should, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's having a strong solar industry in Pennsylvania isn't just about incentives, but also updating the energy policy environment in Pennsylvania, right? Evan and I both mentioned, and Representative Vitale as well, the AEPS legislation was passed 20 years ago. The clean energy industry and the needs of the Pennsylvania grid have evolved significantly since that legislation was passed. So I think there are changes beyond incentive structures that are necessary as well that the PRESS Act gets towards. So I did want to flag that.
Okay, very good. And I might just add, we've had PJM testify before this committee at least twice this term, and the issue of grid reliability has come up, and they've expressed no concerns with regard to the grid reliability issue. They note other states have higher AEPSs than we do, and it's not an issue that they really are raising. And, on the issue of why do we need this, I'm just recalling a statistic from the International Energy Agency, perhaps. 4%, only 4% of Pennsylvania's energy comes from renewable sources, and that's just way too low. Rep. Pielli?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a general question. At our previous hearing, there were several concerns that were raised regarding dependency on manufacturing abroad, specifically China, as it pertains to green energy infrastructure, such as the solar panels. Can you speak to how the U.S. manufacturing has expanded in this sector and how it has contributed to meeting increased demand for green energy and the infrastructure required for it? And perhaps maybe you could even give us an example of another state that might have had success in this area.
I can start with that one. So the federal IRA had, through their tax incentives, has created an increased interest in U.S. solar and storage manufacturing. In Q1 of this year, more than 11 gigawatts of new U.S. model manufacturing capacity came online. So we're starting to see the onshoring of more manufacturing when it pertains to the solar and storage supply chain. I'll turn to Evan if you have any specific state examples, but did want to flag that from the IRA.
Yeah, I'll just very quickly add that Pennsylvania's neighbor, Ohio, actually has two facilities that are manufacturing U.S.-made solar panels. So there's the First Solar facility that I think folks are probably familiar with. It's one of the biggest, I think the biggest domestic manufacturer of solar. And then there's a newer facility that Invenergy has been working on standing up in Ohio, which will also be producing domestically made solar panels. So it is a vulnerability that some of our supply chain is relying on imports, but I think we're moving in the right direction. And, frankly, strong domestic incentives are a key to onshoring that manufacturing. So, I think this policy in and of itself is not going to necessarily be what drives that, but it's all part of a holistic picture that ultimately results in a stronger, more independent U.S. electricity supply.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time perhaps for one more question. And does anyone have a question before we move on to the next panel? Danielle?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you both for your testimony and your constructive feedback. The question I have is related to some of the concerns that have been raised around reliability. And I think it's important to point out that the former bill that was the renewable energy standard was a lot less diverse than this bill. And so can you speak to how the diversity of resources that are included in this bill actually improves reliability, and also just from a business perspective, how having more diversity in our energy sources will drive down prices, create more competition, and actually create a more reliable grid?
It's a great question, Representative, and I think we welcome the competition and the tier one incentives here. Our colleagues from the nuclear industry, I think, are speaking later today, and I'm interested to hear their testimony. But we think we can compete in an open incentive kind of structure. Frankly, the federal incentives are also moving toward a tech neutral positioning, and so. I think you're right. There's increasing diversity here. And then I just come back to this is a 35% by 2035 legislation. And that leaves, 2/3 of the state's electricity supply that's not being governed by this policy. And there's bound to be continued, regardless of how you feel about it, there's bound to be continued natural gas and frankly, some coal in the mix as well as existing nuclear. And so, I think if you put too many eggs in one basket, you have a problem. And right now, Pennsylvania, if anything, is over-relying on some of those thermal energy sources. And so we think that this bill will help to balance things out, especially the energy storage component. And for a business, this policy looks like certainty. And that's what we need to make these capital investments in Pennsylvania.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you, Evan and Leah, to you both for your testimony today. We really appreciate it. Keep up the great work. Thank you. Okay, our next speaker will be John Kotek, Senior Vice President, Policy and Public Affairs from the Nuclear Energy Institute. John, are you there? Are you here?
I'm here.
There you go.
Good morning.
Wow.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
No, my pleasure.
Okay.
No. Chair Vitale, Chair Causer, members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today on House Bill 2277. My name is John Kotek. I'm Senior Vice President for Policy and Public Affairs at the Nuclear Energy Institute. NEI is the national trade association for the commercial nuclear energy industry here in the U.S. We represent the policy interests of over 340 members in the nuclear power industry, including power plant licensees, reactor designers, technology companies, architect engineering firms, fuel suppliers and service companies, companies involved in nuclear medicine and industrial applications, universities, research laboratories, law firms, labor unions, international electric utilities, and others. As you know, Pennsylvania has historically been a leader on nuclear energy. The Commonwealth's 8 currently operating nuclear reactors generate more than 30% of the electricity produced in Pennsylvania and more than 90% of the carbon-free generation. This is enough to power 7.5 million homes while providing 4,500 high-paying long-term jobs. Pennsylvania is also home to world-leading nuclear energy suppliers like Westinghouse and the Curtiss-Wright Electromechanical Division, which employ thousands more Pennsylvanians. The energy sector in the U.S. has undergone significant transformation over the last decade, and that transformation will continue. NEI recently conducted a survey of our member utilities, and we found that just our utility members, which represent about half the electricity generation in the U.S., they anticipate adding more than 100 gigawatts of new nuclear power by the 2050s to guarantee reliable access to clean energy as we bring more wind, more solar, and other clean technologies onto the grid. Non-electric sectors such as industrial heat and transportation are also considering nuclear energy to transition to a reliable, clean, and affordable energy supply. Ensuring that state energy policies are in place to support preserving and expanding nuclear generation is essential to ensuring an affordable, secure, and resilient energy sector well into the future. So the best way for our country to achieve that sort of affordable, reliable, and lower carbon system is for nuclear power to remain a significant and growing source of clean energy. As we've heard today, we're certainly going to see other clean technologies increasingly brought to bear, but nuclear energy has an essential role to play in being that firm, clean generation that's there when you need it. You can turn it on and off when you need it. And one other thing I should add is that focusing only on the grid and the need for additional electricity in the U.S., would mistakenly overlook the likelihood of and the need for more energy in other sectors, such as transportation, industrial heat, and hydrogen production. Nuclear is the only clean, reliable, and affordable energy source that can produce heat and steam that's needed for many of these, frankly, harder to decarbonize processes and harder to decarbonize sectors. Enacting state policies that encourage the continuation of the current nuclear fleet is particularly timely, as the U.S. Energy Information Administration forecasts the retirement of 140 gigawatts of generating capacity of all types across the country by 2040, including several nuclear power reactors. The existing domestic nuclear fleet is a central part of our nation's critical infrastructure and shouldn't be taken for granted. Our nuclear energy future will include safe long-term operation of our existing reactors through things like subsequent license renewals that are already have been achieved for some reactors to allow operation for 80 years or even more. Policymakers in state capitals in Washington, D.C. have taken action to preserve 22 reactors that were at risk of closing prematurely, taking steps to acknowledge those reactors for their emissions-free generation. These actions have had the added benefit of preserving more than 10,000 jobs with family-sustaining wages. Of course, not all these efforts were successful, and some units, such as 3 Mile Island Unit 2, are no longer operational. House Bill 2277 will help ensure that the Commonwealth's current nuclear fleet continues to save the people of Pennsylvania from about 36.5 million metric tons of carbon emissions each year. The legislation recognizes nuclear energy as a clean energy source and values the clean energy produced by a nuclear reactor that provides benefits to the Commonwealth. The House bill is sound fiscal policy. A plant is unable to receive program benefits while also receiving the federal Section 45U zero-emission nuclear production tax credit, and Pennsylvania can also recapture funds should a plant permanently close within 3 years of receiving its program benefit. The legislation also looks towards the future and technological advancements currently taking place in the energy sector and includes advanced nuclear energy as a Tier 1 energy resource under the Pennsylvania Reliable Energy Sustainability Standard. So in conclusion, let me say that we appreciate and applaud Pennsylvania's support for nuclear energy. While 20 states have passed legislation to incentivize nuclear energy in the past year, House Bill 2277 is notable for taking strong action to create a program for nuclear energy that will secure the long-term operation of existing and very valuable nuclear power stations. With this continued support and the dedication of the industry, NEI is confident the U.S. will enhance its leadership role in nuclear technology and generation. On behalf of NEI and its members, I'd like to thank you for considering this important piece of legislation. It will also ensure that these economic engines continue to play a critical role in the nation's electric infrastructure. We look forward to working with the committee and the General Assembly as House Bill 2277 makes its way through the process. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I got a question. This has been explained to me once. I'm not sure I fully get it, but near the end of this bill, there's a section on zero-emission credits as it relates to the nuclear power industry. Can you, in layman's terms, explain how that would help you and what your thoughts are on that section? I think it's section 8.1.
Yeah, so broadly speaking, what we saw in the U.S., and particularly in the competitive electricity markets over the last 10 years or so, was that you had things like natural gas, for example, that got very inexpensive. And as a result, you had electricity generation that was providing revenues in the competitive electricity markets that were insufficient to meet all of the costs associated with running a nuclear power plant. And so what we saw some other states do that wanted to preserve their generation was to recognize nuclear for being zero emission and provide a premium for those plants that they weren't otherwise receiving. So as we heard this morning, for example, we now have at the federal level a clean energy credit for new generation that puts nuclear on par with wind and solar. But historically, existing nuclear hasn't received any sort of a federal credit for being zero carbon, and it hasn't received typically support in state policies, which have been focused on renewable energy standards, not on clean energy standards. And so what these zero emission credits have done, you know, if you look at the states that have used them, is they've provided enough revenue to ensure that those nuclear plants remained in operation over the longer term, which has been very valuable not just in terms of retaining clean electricity generation, but also maintaining the hundreds of long-term jobs that exist at each of these plants. So it's proven to be very effective policy in other states.
Okay, and then I'll just ask another question. So I've been reading about a possible 3 Mile Island startup, one of the units. Where does that stand, and what could the state do to facilitate that?
Well, so that's something that Constellation will need to answer. That's very much their decision to make. What I can tell you is that we have seen in other states action taken to restart nuclear plants. So, for example, the Palisades nuclear plant in Michigan has announced their intent to restart. Federal government has provided some support. The state has provided some support as well to help make the economic case and make the necessary investments to bring that plant back into operation. So there is precedent in other states for the federal government to work alongside the state to provide funding to restart a reactor that has been shut down. The other thing I'll point to is the state of California. As you may know, the Diablo Canyon plants there were slated to close in the years 2024 and 2025. The state came to the realization that that was a really important source of firm, clean power to complement the very large shares of solar power they have in the state, along with the wind. So there again, the federal government, through the Department of Energy Loan Program Office and the Civil Nuclear Credit Program at DOE, coupled with funding provided by the state, have combined to allow for the investments to be made to run that plant well beyond the initial 2024-2025 timeframe. So I can't speak to the specific policy that would make the most sense for you all, but we have seen the states and the federal government working together to both restart plants that have been shut down and to sustain the operation of plants that had been announced for closure.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Rep. Stambaugh?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead.
Are we good?
Did Marty, did you want to go Marty first, or Rep. Stambaugh first?
I would let Representative Stambaugh, please.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rep.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you. So Pennsylvania currently has about 8,600 megawatts of nuclear power, commercial nuclear power from the 8 reactors that are operating in the state. Do you know where they stand as far as relicensing to continue operations? I mean, are any in danger of shutting down here in the next 5-10 years?
So great question. I can get to you specifically on the licensed states and what have you. I've got that information, but not at my fingertips here. I think the thing to think about longer term, though, is what we've seen happen at the federal level is we first saw the Department of Energy empowered by Congress to establish something like a Civil Nuclear Credit Program, which was intended to preserve existing generation. That has kind of been superseded by a production tax credit for existing nuclear generation, which provides a bit of a backstop. And it does what some of these state ZEC policies we talked about earlier have done in terms of providing some additional revenue if prices in the markets fall too low. That provision of the tax code expires in 2032. And so what could happen 2032 and beyond is you could find yourself right back in that same situation where prices in the markets, particularly if you don't have a way of recognizing the zero carbon benefit of nuclear, prices in the market could fall too low. And so it's important to not take the long-term operation of these reactors for granted and to enact policies that are going to be there to ensure that they're around for the long term. Thank you.
And I noticed you said that utilities nationwide are looking to add about 100,000 megawatts of nuclear power over next foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that? I mean, that's a lot of nuclear nuclear plants coming online. How are they looking at this as small modular reactor technology? I mean, are we looking at the fiasco they just finished in Georgia, getting those Oglethorpe plants up? I mean, it took them 30 years to get those reactors operating.
So to your last point first, the conversation in Georgia has been fascinating because certainly those plants ran significantly over budget and beyond What's happened since then is the governor of the state has actually come out and said he wants to see another one built, Vogtle 5, okay? What happened in Georgia is that the state, by virtue of adding more than 2,000 megawatts of firm clean generation, they were able to attract a number of companies that care about having that firm clean generation available to them. They've made decarbonization pledges by 2050 or sooner. And it's not just for their own energy production, it's that and their supply chains. And so companies are attracted to places that have affordable, reliable, clean energy. And so it's become quite an economic engine for Georgia to have those plants. The 100 gigawatts that I mentioned earlier, that would roughly double the amount of nuclear generation we have in the United States. Well, we built our existing nuclear fleet over about a 20-year period. So we've done it before, we can do it again. Right now, it's those states that have 100% clean energy standards that include nuclear that are the ones that are the leading candidates. So Duke in North Carolina, for example, has got a small modular reactor in their integrated resource plan. Dominion in Virginia, Energy Northwest in Washington State. Folks like that. Even Rocky Mountain Power is building a Bill Gates-backed advanced reactor in the state of Wyoming to help serve part of their service territories. And so, to your question about SMRs, some of the utilities are very much focused on the smaller modular reactors, a few hundred megawatts in size, not the 1,000 megawatts. But we're hearing more and more conversation about building the big ones too. And so it really is a wide open marketplace right now. I guess the other thing I should add is Westinghouse is building quite a number of their AP1000 reactors overseas as well. So I think as they go through this process of building more and more of these, you'll start working down that cost curve, and future deployments will be more affordable.
Okay, so thank you. So we have less than a minute. Marty, could you, I know you wanted to ask a question, but it could be a really quick question and a really quick answer.
I'll do my best, thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll wave off till the next testifier.
Okay. Well, then let's just end it there. I see Rep. Pielli has a question, but we'll hold him till the next segment. Well, thank you very much. Really
Thanks for having
appreciate your testimony here.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. Okay, very good. So we will move on to our next panel. We have Julia Courtray, Deputy State Policy Director from Evergreen, and we have Nick Bibby, Policy Principal, Advanced Energy United. And there you guys go. I see three of you, which is fine. So you guys can start when ready, and whoever wants to go first, feel free.
Sure, I'm happy to start.
Okay, Julia, go ahead.
Excellent. Good morning, Chairman Vitale, Chairman Causer, and honorable members of the House Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Representative Otten's House Bill 227, the Pennsylvania Reliable Energy Sustainability Standards Act, or known as PRESS. My name is Julia Courtray, and I am the Deputy State Policy Director at Evergreen Action, a national organization working to support states in deploying federal funds and curbing climate pollution. We support local and state partners in navigating federal clean energy laws and opportunities, as well as in advancing climate and clean energy policy. Through the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA, the Biden-Harris administration is unlocking billions of dollars in funding and resources for states, communities, individuals, and businesses to develop clean energy and create millions of jobs. Right now, Pennsylvania has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to be a leader in creating clean energy jobs, attracting private sector investments, and building a just and inclusive energy future. Enacting PRESS is a critical step in helping Pennsylvania attract and secure these investments. We commend the members of this committee for holding the second hearing on the PRESS proposal and for further advancing this opportunity to develop a more robust and diverse energy portfolio for Pennsylvania. First, PRESS is an essential and attainable update to Pennsylvania's Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard. PRESS updates and expands Pennsylvania's Alternative Energy Portfolio Standards Act, or AEPS. AEPS, which was enacted back in 2004 and established the 8% target for 2021, has been achieved and left moribund. While Pennsylvania was once a leader in clean energy development 20 years ago, it has since fallen behind in renewable generation and now ranks 45th in the country. PRESS creates 3 tiers of electricity generation eligible in the revised AEPS. Tier 1 resources, primarily clean energy, would need to provide 35% of in-state power generation by 2035. Several states already exceed 35% renewable energy generation, including Iowa, South Dakota, Kansas, Vermont, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Maine, and North Dakota. Further, other states in the region have also enacted higher renewable energy standards, including Maryland, New Jersey, and New York. With 8 states having exceeded the 35% target already, meeting this target in 2035, a decade later, is reasonably achievable. Second, PRESS is critical to diversifying the Commonwealth's energy generation and producing renewable, reliable, and affordable energy. After 2022's Winter Storm Elliott caused outages across the state and throughout the region, it became clear that Pennsylvania's grid needs modernizing. And diversifying the state's energy portfolio is a critical part of that modernization. As severe storms and extreme weather become more frequent, a more diverse energy generation portfolio would help increase grid stability and protect consumers from price spikes or over-reliance on any one type of energy source. The PRESS Act would provide the incentives necessary to diversify Pennsylvania's energy portfolio and encourage more reliable, affordable, renewable energy. Further, it sends a clear market signal that Pennsylvania is open for business when it comes to renewable energy development, rather than going to competing states instead. Hence, PRESS would help ensure Pennsylvania remains competitive with neighboring states and preserves its leadership in energy production. Third, and most excitingly, PRESS is a strategic economic workforce development tool. The IRA and the IIJA both established and enhanced substantial tax credits and grant programs that Pennsylvania could claim to lower the cost of clean energy resources. Passing the PRESS Act into law would unlock and accelerate the flow of these new federal funding opportunities to Pennsylvania to increase reliable, affordable, clean energy deployment and help lower energy bills. This new clean energy generation would bring $177 million in federal tax dollars to Pennsylvania every year from the standard production tax credit. Over the next decade, that translates to $1.77 billion in tax credits. Most of the state is also considered an energy community, which can be defined as regions that have had significant employment or tax revenue from fossil fuel industries and also have a high employment rate, areas with recent coal mining closures or coal generation closures, or brownfield sites. These energy communities are eligible for stackable bonus credits. Bonus credits for energy communities and domestic content could increase Pennsylvania tax credit awards to $2.15 billion. These tax credits would bring down the cost of Pennsylvanians' energy bills while also supporting local businesses and creating new jobs. Because this only measures federal funding gained from Tier 1, it is an underestimation. Clean energy is already the lowest cost source of electricity today, even without tax credits, according to the U.S. Department of Energy's Berkeley Lab. And these tax credits mean that PRESS requirements will save Pennsylvanians even more money. Here's an example of how federal funding further reduces costs. If a solar developer were building a project in Western Pennsylvania within an energy community, it could claim the full investment tax credit, the energy community's bonus credit, and the domestic requirement bonus credit. Each of these tax credits would add up to 50% of the entire project's cost, resulting in essentially a 50% discount on the project. Tier 2 and Tier 3 resources can also claim federal subsidies. Under PRESS, Tier 2 and Tier 3 resources must achieve 10% of the electricity mix by 2034 and 5% by 2031, respectively. Carbon capture and storage and hydrogen co-firing technologies are both eligible in these categories. The IRA created or expanded tax credits for both of these technologies as well. federal tax credits that Pennsylvania could claim by enacting PRESS include the investment tax credit.
Julia, you
production
have
tax-
about a minute.
Thank you. 45Q tax credit for CCS and 45V tax credit for clean hydrogen. But there is a real urgency in accessing these tax credits and incentives, as most will begin to phase out by 2032. If Pennsylvania wants to claim these funds and take advantage of the federal fire sale on clean energy, it must act soon. Pennsylvania is already leveraging substantial competitive grant funding for clean energy from the IRA and IIJA, including improving affordability and reliability to support the goals of PRESS. Just last week, as an example, Pennsylvania was awarded nearly $400 million from the Carbon Pollution Reduction Grant Program. So I'll skip to that to my conclusion. In conclusion, PRESS is a common sense but critical update to Pennsylvania's AEPS standards. Enacting PRESS would give Pennsylvania legislators a real win to bring home to their constituents, local affordable renewable energy, and billions in federal dollars that would otherwise go unclaimed to other states. But this massive funding windfall is time-bound. Pennsylvania must act to accelerate the flow of federal funds to support affordable clean energy development and protect its leadership in energy generation. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Oh, thank you, Julia. And Nick, before we begin, I'm assuming you don't have an identical twin who's also participating. There are two of you on the screen, and what concerns me
I can't say I do.
is you're not 100% in sync. So
There's like a stadium view type thing.
got it.
So one is them, and then
Okay. Okay. Well, let's see how it goes. I can live with this, but as long as your voices aren't out of sync. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, if there's an issue with my audio, please let me know, and we can stop and
Sounds
get
good
all
so
sorted
far.
out. Okay, good. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of Advanced Energy United, I want to express my thanks to Chairman Vitale, Chairman Causer, and members and staff of the House Environmental Resources and Energy Committee for holding today's hearing on House Bill 2277. My name is Nick Bibby. I serve as the Pennsylvania Policy Lead for Advanced Energy United. United is a national clean energy and clean technology business association active in 19 states across the country, representing businesses across the energy sector, including large-scale and distributed renewables, energy storage providers, transmission developers, electric vehicle manufacturers, and EV charging infrastructure suppliers. Our goal is to educate, engage, and advocate for policies that allow our 100-plus member companies to compete to power our economy with clean energy. The companies we represent are lowering consumer costs, creating thousands of new jobs annually, and providing a full range of clean, efficient, and reliable energy and transportation solutions. I'll keep my testimony brief, as there have been many strong points raised today by SEIA, America Action, and Evergreen Action. United is proud to support Representative Freelotin's House Bill 2277 and the Pennsylvania Reliable Energy Sustainability Standard, or PRESS. This policy represents the opportunity for the Commonwealth to increase clean energy development and secure its status as a national energy leader. Keystone State has long been an energy leader for decades now, ranking second in the country in energy production and third in electricity generation. Our industry and the members we represent would like to help Pennsylvania maintain its status as a leader and seize upon the clean energy potential that the Commonwealth has to offer. Pennsylvania to this day ranks 45th in the nation in terms of total clean energy production, while states like Texas are starting to heavily prioritize an industry that has tremendous job and economic development potential. United and our members would like to see Pennsylvania again secure this position as an American energy leader, and House Bill 2277 will help to do just that. As I mentioned, Pennsylvania has enormous clean energy potential, and United's members are excited to develop here, creating jobs and building up local communities in the process. The advanced energy industry is a major job creator for Pennsylvania and the country. As noted today by Evan Vaughn of Merrick Action, earlier this year, United worked with Gable Associates, Merrick Action, and the American Clean Power Association on a report titled The Economic and Environmental Impact of Governor Shapiro's 30 by 30 Alternative Energy Pledge. This report, based on House Bill 1467, as noted, found that raising Pennsylvania's clean energy targets could generate over $13.1 billion in new private investments brought to the Commonwealth in a 7-year period, creating over 129,000 jobs by 2035 and having tremendous environmental and economic benefits too. I'll note as well that we must dispel the false narrative that we have to choose between clean energy and affordable energy. Both are easily achievable here in Pennsylvania. A recent energy innovation report showed that the real drivers of increased electricity rates and bills are not tied to clean energy, but rather spikes in fossil gas prices and rising costs to maintain and rebuild aging and stressed grid infrastructure. That same report also found that high levels of clean energy do not correlate to high electricity prices, rather the opposite. In states with large growth in wind and solar generation, such as Iowa, Kansas, and Oklahoma, electricity rate increases have been slower than the rate of inflation. Additionally, Texas, a leading state in deploying wind, solar, and energy storage batteries, has seen lower electricity costs over the last decade or so. Wind and solar generation in Texas has reduced costs in the state's wholesale electricity market by $31.5 billion between 2010 and 2022, with $11 billion of that coming in 2022 alone. As noted in my written testimony, United would encourage legislators on this committee to consider changes to House Bill 2277 that will help maximize the policy's full potential to create economic development and jobs, as has also been noted today by the Solar Energy Industries Association and Merrick Action. United supports the inclusion of a specific target for distributed solar generation, similar to the solar photovoltaic requirement in Pennsylvania's current Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, or AEPS policy. This will not only have a positive economic impact on the Commonwealth, but will help to create a more resilient and efficient electric grid. As noted by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection in their Pennsylvania Solar Future Plan, distributed solar generation creates a large portion of jobs in the advanced energy sector, with many of those jobs based right here in the Commonwealth. Distributed solar generation also has positive grid impacts, as solar energy produced on-site for a property is a shorter distance to travel than energy produced from large-scale energy plants, losing less electricity during the transmission process. United represents several companies in the distributed solar generation space, as well as companies developing smart grid and demand response technologies, which when paired together can allow electric utilities in Pennsylvania to manage the grid more effectively and protect communities from major grid disruptions. Additionally, United would encourage legislators on this committee to examine the in-state generation requirements of House Bill 2277 and ensure these goals can be met on the timelines outlined in the legislation. As introduced, the bill requires 10% of energy sold by an electric distribution company or electric generation supplier and used to satisfy that company's Tier 1 obligations to be generated in-state by 2030, with a 1% increase each year until 2050. While United is strongly supportive of clean energy development right here in Pennsylvania, as I've laid out this morning, we want to ensure that there is a stronger ramp-up period for this in-state requirement and ensure that, again, the timelines can be met. Currently, Tier 1 in-state requirements sit at 0.5% as outlined by the AEPS, and would jump to 10% in House Bill 2277 in a 6-year time period. Our industry and the members we represent are ready to work with the committee to explore this requirement further and how we can find a path forward that encourages as much in-state generation as possible, with a ramp from our current requirement to the requirement outlined in this legislation. To reiterate, however, United is strongly supportive of House Bill 2277 and see this as an opportunity for Pennsylvania to diversify its energy grid, support the development of a growing industry, and secure its status as a national energy leader. United and our member companies are ready to work with Pennsylvania's policymakers and seize on the Commonwealth's potential for development of clean energy, opening us up for new investment, job creation, and economic development opportunities. I want to reiterate my appreciation for the administration and Representative Freelon for their leadership on this critical policy. Thank you again for inviting my testimony today on this issue, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Okay, thank you. Marty, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chairman Vitale. I guess my question centers around, again, grid stability. And PJM has continually been raising concerns about reliability. And do you share PJM's growing concern that thermal, fossil fuel power plants are retiring too quickly, and that we will have serious grid reliability issues by the end of the decade if that doesn't change?
I'm happy to take a first stab at that. I think where we're at United is we're more so concerned about PJM's ability to interconnect new clean energy facilities to the grid. PJM has made incremental progress on the recent, regarding their recent approval process changes to increase clean energy production, but much more can and should be done. We believe PJM needs to be fully compliant with FERC Order 2023, which reforms the procedures and agreements that electric transmission providers use to incorporate new generating facilities to the electric grid. PJM currently has a request into FERC that their current reforms are enough and they do not need to go further to be fully compliant. However, we have responded to this filing outlining our disagreement with PJM's assessment. Currently, new projects are still banned from entering the interconnection queues until sometime in 2025, which is unprecedented and unacceptable, hindering clean energy development here in Pennsylvania and across the PJM footprint. As I mentioned, we're strongly supportive of clean energy development here in Pennsylvania, but to make that happen, PJM needs to go further in its reforms.
But do you share their concern that we could see reliability issues? With power plants coming offline too quickly, they've really sounded the alarm. I know there have been serious concerns in Maryland, and we're watching that closely because we certainly don't want those issues in Pennsylvania.
No, you're absolutely right. I think at the end of the day, we're more so concerned again about the lack of new clean energy facilities coming online. We know those can be reliable. We want to make sure PJM is getting those interconnected to the grid as quickly as possible. And more so, we know that at the end of the day, a more diversified energy grid, which House Bill 2277 will help achieve, just only increases reliability.
Okay, we have a list of questions. I don't know if Julia, you wanted to quickly respond to that, but we have a list of questions.
I can quickly add 2 points. I think we've seen other RTOs or ISOs feeling ready to address some of these changes as well. So I think while PJM may express concern, we see places like ISO New England and MISO in the Midwest have demonstrated and communicated their ability to meet these transitions. And then I think it's also really important to remember that we're already experiencing some reliability and stability issues with our current system, and it needs modernization. And with clean energy, that will help add more reliability by not making us overly dependent on one type of energy source. And I think the goals that we've set in this bill are quite modest in terms of before we would reach any level that would create the need for new innovation or serious concerns about reliability and stability at this current phase of technology.
Rep. Hellenstein?
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank you both and actually all of the presenters for being here today. My question revolves around this issue of jobs, and the job creation is something central to me because not all jobs are created equal. And when we talk about trying to have a retraining or reinitiation into a job sector for people who have been displaced, I think we've got to be really careful to make sure that it's jobs that are suitable, provide similar income, similar stability in those folks' lives. The classic example is we've talked a lot with our building trades partners about displaced coal mine workers and how do we find the correct types of jobs in these new sectors or related areas, maybe such as well plugging out in some of our other areas as well. But what I'd like to ask of you is that idea of our job creation, what are we doing to ensure that we are finding not just money to throw at jobs, but also the creation of jobs that will be suitable for the people being transitioned out. And then I have a secondary question.
Okay,
that
okay,
also
we have
relates- I know.
a line of questions. So why don't we do this? Why don't we just respond
To that.
question? We have Rep. Steele and Rep. Otten next, and then if we have time, we can go back. Go ahead. Does anyone want to handle that?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in here. So I think first, it's incredibly important that with any new economic opportunity that we make sure that workers have the opportunity and the capability to take advantage and really benefit from these new investments. I think there's been several steps that will help support Pennsylvania in these efforts. First, I want to applaud Governor Shapiro's effort to create the Commonwealth Workforce Transformation Program, which will provide workforce development dollars from every IRA-funded grant to provide some of that workforce development and retraining. I do want to acknowledge that worker retraining is a very difficult thing in any sector and in any type of new generation or increased technology opportunities. And so we know that this is something that folks really need to pay attention to and should be a significant focus as this bill further develops and hopefully goes into implementation. And then third, I do want to underscore that in the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits and incentives, there are significant incentives for businesses to provide high quality, well-paying jobs, like the prevailing wage tax credit bonus, the emphasis of locating facilities in energy communities that have a history or a current presence of coal or natural gas or other fossil fuel industry, so that the workers who are currently in or have been in those industries have the opportunity, a reasonable opportunity to transition into those types of jobs just by being more local. And then there are a number of jobs that are very translatable, like whether that's welding or electricians, a large selection of job opportunities that are well-paying, family-sustaining jobs.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Do you have anything to add before we move along?
I do not. I think
Okay.
Julia hit the nail on the head there.
That's fine. Okay, Rep. Steele. Andy?
Chairman, I'm going to waive off.
Okay, Rep. Otten.
Thank you, Chairman. On the topic of local impacts, so what we know about diversifying our energy portfolio is that it expands the geographical areas that get to participate in Pennsylvania's energy economy. And I've had a lot of conversations over the last few months with folks about the impacts of that and how that translates, not just to jobs for the local community, which are really, really important, but also to, just the greater good of the community, contributing to funding for local schools, emergency services, infrastructure, really expanding the communities that can benefit from the opportunity of the clean energy economy here in Pennsylvania. And thinking back through Pennsylvania's history of boom and bust, especially as it relates to the energy economy, it provides, in my mind, a great opportunity to revitalize a lot of communities that have been harmed over the years by that boom and bust, cycle of the economy here in Pennsylvania. Can you speak a little bit to that, and how not only expanding and diversifying our energy portfolio leads to jobs, good jobs for families, but also economic development, stable communities that can fund their schools, can fund their infrastructure, can fund their local emergency services independently, and thrive.
Sure, I'd be happy to jump in here again. I think this is a really exciting time that we don't have to choose between local, clean, reliable energy sources and high quality jobs and workforce opportunities. When it comes to the development life cycle and the opportunities for workers to maintain a stable career, 30, 40 years in this industry, I think there's several things we can look at here that give me a lot of confidence. One, we've talked a lot about the need for increased energy production in the state, period. So we need to be developing more energy, and we need to continue to be developing more energy for the next several decades. And so we're going to need a lot of workers, a lot of professionals to make that happen. Once those, whether it's a wind farm or a solar farm, we're going to need workers to continue to do the operations and maintenance and repair and work for the life cycle of the project. And then when it comes to decommissioning, there are lots of opportunities, whether it's to replace with even more powerful solar arrays or more powerful wind turbines, or there's a new technology in 20 to 30 years that is even more efficient and exciting. There's lots of opportunities there. And all of this also requires an incredible amount of manufacturing. And with the investments coming from the IRA and IIJA, there's incredible incentives to help domesticate the manufacturing of solar panels, wind turbines, energy storage, batteries, so many different ways that our workers can continue to benefit and make sure that not only the energy we're producing is coming from Pennsylvania, but that the components that go into the production have been also made by Pennsylvanians. So I think there are so many different ways that we can continue to promote job security without having to overly subsidize an industry, being that it is already much cheaper than many of of all of the fossil fuel resources. So I think it's a very exciting opportunity and a way for folks to continue to be proud energy workers in Pennsylvania.
Nick, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree with everything Julia says here. I would just highlight that this is an all of the above approach, and increasing Pennsylvania's clean energy targets. As I mentioned in our study that we worked on with Merrick Action, Gable Associates, and the American Clean Power Association, has the potential to raise Pennsylvania's gross state product by $15 billion and bring about $6.5 billion in reduced emissions. So this is, not just creating jobs, but again, really spurring up local economies and supporting Pennsylvania's economy as a whole.
Okay, thank you. So looks like that's all the time we have for this segment. Thank you both for your testimony. Next, we will have Rod Williamson, Executive Director, Industrial Energy Consumers of Pennsylvania.
All right. Good morning, Chairman Vitale and Cossar and members of the committee.
Good
I am
morning.
Rod Williamson, Executive Director of the Industrial Energy Consumers of Pennsylvania. This is a trade association formed in 1982, so we've been around for a while, and it's the voice of large energy consumers in Pennsylvania. We played a critical role in the restructuring of both the electricity and natural gas industries in Pennsylvania. IECPA member companies provide good-paying jobs in Pennsylvania, and today we're here to provide feedback regarding House Bill 2277, sponsored by Representative Otten. So I know you've had a long morning of hearing testimony. So why is IECPA's testimony this morning important? Well, we are the customers who are impacted by policies such as House Bill 2277. Many of Pennsylvania's large industrial manufacturing customers are energy-intensive, trade-exposed manufacturers. What does that mean? An energy-intensive business is one whose production processes require so much energy that small changes in energy price translate into large changes in cost. A trade-exposed business is one competing against many similar businesses in other states or in other countries for the same customers. A trade-exposed business cannot pass small cost increases onto its customers without risking the loss of that business to a competitor with a better price. And for these manufacturing customers, the electricity supply must be reliable. An unplanned outage of a manufacturing facility can result in hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses. So there has been talk about potential jobs that will be created by House Bill 2277, but we must also consider the energy-intensive manufacturing jobs and the significant job multiplier from those manufacturing jobs that would be at risk from House Bill 2277. So while a Pennsylvania-specific clean energy plan and program would be better than joining a regional program, such as the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, IACPA has several concerns regarding bills introduced known as PACER and PRESS, and specifically regarding the PRESS plan. And in this House Bill 2277, I'll discuss two of IACPA's concerns. First, there is no need for a PA-specific zero emission credit or ZEC program. IACPA certainly believes that nuclear energy is an important electricity supply resource, providing both clean and reliable electricity supply. However, as you heard earlier, there are existing federal programs that provide support for nuclear. And while we've heard that these federal programs will expire, it's years from now. IACPA has serious concerns regarding the need for a PA-specific ZEC program at this time that would place the cost of supporting nuclear energy only on PA electric customers. Energy-intensive exposed customers like IACPA members cannot afford to pay higher electricity prices in Pennsylvania versus competitors in other states. Second, the bill requires significant increases in the use of specific energy sources. Why is that a concern? The bill picks specific generation resources that receive a financial incentive. This revenue for specific resources chosen by state policy interferes with Pennsylvania's participation in the PJM market. And while the bill provides for an off-ramp if sufficient PRESS energy resources are not reasonably available, there is no consideration of an off-ramp regarding reliability impacts from the early retirement of baseload generation driven by this state policy. And this risk is being highlighted by PJM. PJM published a recent analysis entitled Energy Transition in PJM, Resource Retirements, Replacements, and Risk. That report addresses the potential imbalance between increasing load and accelerating retirements through 2030, many of which are being driven by state policies just like House Bill 2277, rather than economics. In fact, PJM analysis shows that 40 gigawatts of existing generation are at risk of retirement by 2030. Now, earlier, Evan referenced this study, but what he didn't mention is that this 40 gigawatts of generation at risk figure is existing generation, not planned generation in the queue that might not get built. And it's composed of 25 gigawatts of potentially policy-driven retirements. This 40 gigawatts represents 21% of PJM's current installed capacity. So the organization that is responsible for managing the electricity market in which Pennsylvania participates is in fact now warning about the market impacts of state-specific policies like this bill. Additionally, from a report by our own PA Public Utility Commission regarding the APS compliance for reporting year 22 through 23, on page 13 of that report, it provides a summary table which shows the purchase of alternative energy credits, the AECs, has resulted in a cost of $528 million. And when you do the math based on the number of the associated alternative energy credit, this equals $21.17 per megawatt hour. So to put that in perspective, again, what does it mean? The PJM real-time load-weighted average LMP, the market price in 2023, was $31.08 per megawatt hour. So while others have testified how clean energy is the lowest cost source of electricity, in Pennsylvania, for residential, commercial, and industrial electricity customers, the AEPS program has almost doubled the cost of electricity for the clean energy resources used to comply with this AEPS policy. This places PA industrial customers at a competitive disadvantage to other states who are adding renewable energy without these specific added costs. And further, I'll just highlight that on page 15 of that report by the Public Utility Commission, and I quote, they talk about the meteoric increase in Tier 2 AEC pricing and, again quoting, substantial compliance cost for the AEPS. So while these concerns are significant, IACPA does appreciate a few aspects of House Bill 2277. We appreciate the consideration and addition of demand-side management, including industrial byproduct technologies, along with combined heat and power systems and distributed generation systems. We also appreciate the consideration of natural gas or coal generation, which incorporates clean hydrogen, co-firing, or equivalent carbon reduction technologies. In summary, regarding any energy and climate policy, IACPA seeks a plan that enhances existing industrial and manufacturing base and promotes employment and economic growth in Pennsylvania. But most importantly, a reliable energy supply to support Pennsylvania's large energy users. Now, in my written testimony, I provided a list of general principles regarding energy and climate policy. I'm not going to take the time to read through those, but I encourage everyone to please take a look at those.
Rod, you're at about 8 minutes right now.
Thank you. Yep. And just to summarize, because House Bill 2277 does not satisfy these items or these principles, IACPA does not support the bill at this time. We appreciate your consideration of my testimony, and IACPA looks forward to working with you to formulate an energy plan that keeps industrial customers in the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Joe, Joe Helmstein, did you have a question? No, not for this. Okay, Mary?
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony today. I think that we're at a point where we all are recognizing, or at least we are on this committee, that we're having a robust discussion about where we're going to take energy and energy policy here in Pennsylvania. And I kind of look at it from a perspective of we need to invest in ourselves here in Pennsylvania and not just continue what we've had. I think that when we add onto our portfolios and expand, we're going to be able to drive down costs that are, quite frankly, going up because we don't have the investments being made with regard to expanding our energy sources. And certainly for the people that you represent, we certainly appreciate the industry that is here and want to make sure that everything is effective for operating their businesses, but we also are here to invest in ourselves and generate more business and more energy, and certainly in clean ways. And so some of the testimony we took earlier had to deal with the nuclear capacity and possibly investing in, as that is a source that can quickly be increasing, because we have other new industries that have come into Pennsylvania, such as the mining for the cryptocurrency, all these very heavily energy reliant businesses that possibly are also helping to drive up the costs. So would you, I'm glad that you're willing to work with us as we formulate this this legislation, but I think it would be really constructive if looking at that we will do it, perhaps what you might want to, or on behalf of your clients, contribute to our drafting of the legislation rather than not necessarily being opposed to it.
I appreciate those comments, and we certainly stand ready to do that. We're glad to have that discussion. Our concern is that a policy that simply pushes increased cost onto Pennsylvania customers versus any competitors that we have in other states. We heard several times today how these clean energy sources, renewable energy sources, are the lowest cost energy resource. But yet they're saying that they need a state policy, such as this bill, to build in Pennsylvania. This policy simply provides an additional revenue stream to the owners of the generation facility. So it sounds like the developers are saying, you have to pay us more to build in PA, or we'll go build in other states. That does not seem like a policy that's good for customers.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Chairman, just 1 second. I think the point is to incentivize the production so that it can increase, so that with the increase, then perhaps prices can go down for customers like you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Marty?
Thank you, sir, for your testimony. And, a lot of the information presented, at least for me, centers around reliability and cost. And number one, I want to keep the lights on. Number two, I'm concerned about the impact on consumers, the cost to consumers. We're hearing from other testifiers how federal funding further reduces the cost of clean energy projects. My question to you is, how does this legislation truly impact consumers in Pennsylvania?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, and I agree. We heard earlier that there are federal programs as well that are providing these incentives for clean energy resources. But as I mentioned a minute ago, these federal programs and this the alternative energy credit program here that's PA specific provides a revenue stream for the owner of those generation resources and not necessarily the customer who has to purchase the electricity. So there's a difference between PA and other states that are adding this renewable generation as well. In PA, as a state, we have chosen to participate in the PJM market. The distributed utilities no longer own that generation. So when this revenue stream is provided to the owner as of the clean energy resource or renewable resource, as customers, we still have to pay the PJM market price for that energy. So there's not a direct link between a reduction in that cost to the owner and ultimately what we're paying for as customers from that energy supply as well, especially when you figure in the additional cost of the AEPS program. That cost that gets added on is directly paid for by the customers and just takes away any benefit cost-wise that we might be seeing from that generation helping to lower that PJM, overall PJM cost. So in other states, when that generation gets added, it's added into that resource base, and there's not a specific additional credit cost that gets paid for by the customers within those states as well. So we have to make sure that when we're talking about how the addition of renewable resources and clean energy resources have lowered the electricity cost in other states, we have to make sure that we're doing an apples to apples comparison between those states and what the supply structure is within Pennsylvania as well, and what that means for the actual cost to the customer.
Okay, thank you. Well, we are out of time for this segment. I see Danielle has a question. We can give her priority next segment. Next, we have Davey Ramkissoon, Executive Director, Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia. Davey, good to see you.
Good to
see you. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Vitale, Chair Causer, and distinguished members of the House Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today and to join you all virtually as well. My name is Devi Ramkasoon, and I am the Executive Director of the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia, also known as SBN. SBN is a vibrant community of roughly 140 businesses committed to fostering a just, green, and thriving local economy in the Greater Philadelphia region. Our organization's work spans across a variety of sectors, including clean energy, green stormwater infrastructure, local food systems, and urban forestry. Through our diverse membership, SBN promotes a common goal of creating a positive impact within our community and beyond. Many of our members have already voiced their enthusiastic support for House Bill 2277, the Pennsylvania Reliable Energy Sustainability Standard, or PRESS. And in doing so, they are united by a shared dedication to enhancing the social and environmental impacts of their business practices. Pennsylvania has long been a leader in the energy sector, but the economic landscape is rapidly changing. To maintain our leadership and ensure a climate resilient future, we must more fully embrace clean energy. PRESS is an essential step in this direction. By modernizing our renewable energy standards, PRESS will not only help meet the Commonwealth's ambitious climate goals, but will also drive economic growth, which is the focus of my testimony today. The renewable energy sector presents a tremendous opportunity for Pennsylvania. If passed, PRESS has the potential to save ratepayers $252 million in the first 5 years, create over 15,000 jobs annually through 2040, and generate $5.1 billion of investments across the Commonwealth. Unlocking this potential is critical, as we currently lag behind a majority of states in renewable energy growth. PRESS will help reverse this trend, making Pennsylvania a hub for clean energy jobs and innovation. For businesses, particularly those in the energy sector, the transition to renewable energy offers significant benefits. For example, according to Bloomberg, jobs in the renewable energy sector typically pay higher wages, offer better worker benefits, and have lower barriers to entry when compared to traditional energy jobs. This makes them accessible and advantageous for a broader segment of the workforce. This means higher income levels and improved job security for Pennsylvanians. Doug Edwards, president of Exact Solar, an SBN member and premier installer of solar energy systems in Pennsylvania, underscores the importance of forward-thinking legislation like HB 2277. He states, and I quote, "The PRESS initiatives represents a significant opportunity for our state to bolster its renewable energy sector, ensuring we remain at the forefront of American energy producers as the market shifts. We believe that Governor Shapiro's PRESS initiative, if passed, will meaningfully support the solar renewable energy credit or SREC market, making more solar projects financially viable and helping small businesses like ours continue hiring, growing, and investing in our business and workforce development. The sentiment from Exact Solar highlights the crucial role that supportive policies play in driving the sector forward. By advancing PRESS, we can support small independent businesses like Exact Solar in thriving sustainably and competitively. These businesses are the backbone of our local economy, and their success contributes to robust economic growth. Pennsylvania's clean energy economy grew 4.3% and added nearly 4,000 new workers in 2022, according to E2's Clean Jobs report. Clean energy now accounts for over 1/3 of all energy industry jobs in Pennsylvania, a strong statement for the nation's second largest energy producer. Advancing the PRESS initiative will further capitalize on this momentum, ensuring continued growth and investment in the sector and reinforcing Pennsylvania's leadership in shaping a sustainable energy future. In addition to job creation, renewable energy investments can enhance community resilience and reduce energy costs. PRESS will support communities that have historically relied on coal and natural gas industries. Renewable energy sources are less susceptible to the price volatility associated with fossil fuels. By diversifying our energy mix, Pennsylvania can build a more resilient economy that is better equipped to withstand energy market fluctuations. This stability is crucial for businesses and households alike, providing predictable energy costs and reducing the risk of economic disruptions. By updating our renewable energy standards, we can also unlock significant federal investments and support economic diversification in local communities. States like Georgia, Michigan, and Ohio are reaping the substantial benefits of federal clean energy investments, receiving billions of dollars of investments since 2022. In contrast, Pennsylvania has been left behind. It is time that we capitalize on these opportunities as well. Furthermore, transitioning to renewable energy sources can lead to significant energy savings. Opponents of PRESS argue that transitioning to renewable energy will increase costs for consumers. However, the reality is quite the opposite. Diversifying our energy sources and increasing the use of renewables like wind and solar will stabilize and lower energy prices over time. Since 2016, natural gas prices have increased by 51% for Pennsylvania families and businesses. Renewable energy technologies such as solar and wind power have become increasingly cost competitive with traditional fossil fuels. Utility scale solar power is already more affordable than natural gas, and the Federal Clean Energy Plan projects further cost reductions. PRESS, combined with the governor's PACER program, could save consumers millions of dollars in their utility bills in the first 5 years alone. In fact, recent modeling by the NRDC shows that between 2025 and 2042, the average household in Pennsylvania would save a total of $329 in electricity bills and would cut bills by 1.3% annually on average over the next 2 decades, and by up to 2.4%, annually in the mid-2030s. Governor Shapiro's energy plan is designed to bring Pennsylvania's energy generation into better balance through expanding renewable energy sources. This plan, if passed, has the potential to save ratepayers millions of dollars, create hundreds of thousands of jobs, and generate billions of dollars of investments across the Commonwealth. Advancing PRESS legislation is not only just a policy choice, it is an economic necessity. It will position Pennsylvania as a leader in the renewable energy sector and ensure a sustainable future for our state. We urge you to support HB 2277 and help us build a more resilient and prosperous Pennsylvania. Thank you for your time and consideration this morning. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Davy. Danielle, did you have a question?
I can ask a question, yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Davy, thank you for your testimony. So your organization represents businesses, correct? Okay.
Correct.
So I just want to, the last testifier spoke about trade-exposed businesses being businesses that compete against many similar businesses and cannot pass small cost increases onto its customers without risking the loss of that business. And I just wanted to ask you, as someone who represents businesses, can you help to clarify, when we're talking about consumers in that context, that consumer is the corporation that has an energy-intensive business that is polluting local communities with a high social cost. But according to that testimony, those costs cannot actually be passed on to consumers, as in people who pay their electric bills, our constituents, the average resident in Pennsylvania. Can you speak to the benefit of sustainable business practices to the social cost of communities and being a good corporate citizen in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that question because it recognizes that businesses, or at least sustainable businesses, don't only have a financial bottom line interest, that they also have an interest in their local communities and they have an interest in sustaining our environment as well. The businesses that we represent at SBN are sustainable businesses. So they do include solar installers like the one I mentioned, but they also include marketing agencies, fashion designers, glass blowers, and businesses kind of all across the spectrum. And what we see as a commonality amongst those businesses is that they are looking for ways to save on their financial bottom line so that they can spend some of that in improving some of the social concerns as well as environmental concerns that they care about. For example, we've seen a fashion design company that is investing its dollars in ensuring that it can maintain sustainable textiles and repurposing or upcycling of textiles. We've also seen a brewing company that is transforming its workforce, business model into a workforce development one so that it can train returned citizens to enter the workforce. And we've seen a number of other examples across all of the businesses that we represent. So, to echo what you're saying, we've seen that when these businesses are able to save more, they actually spend more on protecting the environment and also bolstering their communities as well. And those ripple effects are tremendous across the economy across the state of Pennsylvania and beyond as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Joe? Did you have any? Okay, any other questions? Thank you so much. We really appreciate your testimony today. Generally, at the beginning of each hearing, I afford the maker of the bill in question the opportunity to say a couple of words about his or her bill, and I forgot to do that this time. So, Danielle, if you'd like to make a closing statement as opposed to an opening statement, you're welcome to do that.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for holding a second hearing on this important legislation. I think for a public policy that is this great in scope, it's really important for us to engage in robust discourse. And I'm really grateful for the constructive feedback of the testifiers at both this hearing and the last hearing. And I want to just uplift what the chairman said at the beginning of the hearing, that amendments are welcome if there is language that some of our stakeholders are advocating for and recommend. Now is a great time to consider those things as we move forward in the legislative process. This legislation is positive for Pennsylvania in three ways. It incentivizes the cleanest energy sources as we expand energy use, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the PJM market and across the United States. It diversifies generations so that we can have more reliability as global challenges impact our energy prices, as increasing extreme weather creates challenges for our local sources, and that also increases and improves affordability and stability. It also has economic development benefits. Pennsylvania is the #1 exporter of electricity, and as clean energy standards across the United States increase their requirements and demands for clean, renewable energy, we are at risk of losing our place as the #1 exporter of electricity in the United States. In addition to that, as I said earlier, it expands what regions of Pennsylvania can participate in the energy economy and have the benefit of the local jobs and the economic development. And in addition to that, the stability for communities in how that contributes to funding for schools, funding for emergency services, and funding for local infrastructure. I think this bill has a net positive. Certainly, we could go further, but I think this is actually a really pragmatic approach to our next step at a critical time when there's critical opportunities before us. So thank you again for everyone also for coming to Harrisburg in the middle of July when lots of folks would prefer to be at the beach or the lake on these nice sunny days before school starts. So appreciate everyone's participation.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you for all your great work on the bill. Marty, did you have any final comments?
Thank you, Chairman Vitale. I also want to thank the testifiers today for the information presented. There are a number of concerns that have been expressed at this hearing and the previous one. There are concerns about reliability. There are concerns about increased cost from this huge mandate that is included in this bill, and really the impact that it has on Pennsylvania consumers. So I have serious concerns with it, and look forward to future work on the bill. the issue.
Okay, thank you. There are 11 session days left before we break, and after we're done this term, after those 11 session days, this bill is dead. So it seems to me it might make sense to give it a shot and run it when we get back if the prime sponsor's amenable to that. So I would echo her comments about getting amendment suggestions in. No bill is perfect. We go through this process to get stakeholder input, and now's the time to give it. So we look forward to working with committee members, the legislature generally, the administration, and the various stakeholders on trying to make this a better bill. So with that, this hearing is adjourned.